you have to have a love for it before you have any motivation to do that at all. And that's what the programs like ours, I think, foster.
That's beautiful.
Would you like me to say it again?
No, once is enough, but it was beautiful.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Paul, Tanya, and Martin. Welcome back, everybody. It's been an episode or two since we've all been around the table. So
it has.
And it may be one or two more before we're all back again.
I know. Spring is busy. We've got travel, conventions. Martin, do you have a convention coming up?
The question is if I have any free time at all coming up. I will be leaving the office tomorrow, and I'm going to see you guys till June.
Okay. Well, party time.
I got a lot of things coming up. Yeah.
Well, the Great Homeschool Convention in Greenville.
Yes,
You'll be speaking.
I will be speaking.
I think
there.
that's what she's trying to get you to say.
Oh, really? Oh, this is promotion. I wasn't even paying attention. I'm sorry.
Left the door wide open, Martin.
Martin thought you were actually concerned about him.
Oh, Martin.
I should know better at all times around here.
Oh, that's funny. Well, with all that travel, do you have any books queued up?
Oh, that's a very good. Well, actually, okay. So I was looking for something to read because I just finished the last book I was reading, and I have been okay. I don't know what I was reading, but it was this praise of Stephen King as a writer, and I started just looking around, and The Green Mile is loved by so many people. So I'm going to read it. I mean, and I've seen, flipping around channels on a TV or something, and you've seen The Green Mile on there constantly. And apparently the movie is supposed to also be very good. So I'm gonna try a Stephen King novel next time.
Okay,
Yeah.
report back.
Oh, my.
Oh my is right. I don't know where this is going.
Paul?
I would just say, I was going to say nothing, but the reality is I have a whole bunch of books that I've started, and most of them I've talked about here, but the one I haven't talked about that I'm trying to read an essay every once in a while is I'll Take My Stand, The Southern Agrarians.
I've got that.
And it was a month or two ago, I sat down and I read the introduction, which I did not care for in the version that's currently being published. But the first essay was just phenomenal.
You know what we did in a book group years ago is we read those essays, but we also read a novel by any of those people
by
that
those
did
authors?
but yes,
Oh.
it took a long time.
Right.
But
Well,
it was really great.
12
So we read
essays.
the novel, read the essay, and then got together and talked about it.
Yeah, and just so people know, I'll Take My Stand is a collection of essays by the Southern agrarian writers.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of these guys, and I'm blanking some of the names.
Robert Penn
Warren was one of them,
Mm-hmm.
the author of one of the great American novels,
All the King's Men.
All the King's Men, which was excellent.
The big thing they're pushing back against is industrialization in the Southern South.
They
the
lost.
Southern agrarian.
They have lost
areas. Yes.
since
Yeah.
then, since they published it, but they really did. They really did try
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
keep those small farms going.
Yes.
But Paul's bringing them back.
Trying.
And the read has been enriching so far?
Yeah. And I mean, it's as much as I didn't care for the introduction, I think the introduction did set me up to understand that, these are 12 different men that have varying positions.
Mhm.
And so I really enjoyed the first one. The second one, I'm sure there'll be some slight differences in what he's saying, but I do
But that was
look forward to
also
that.
something that you were able to do. You could actually publish a collection of essays where people disagreed with each other and were happy to disagree with each other and who loved each other.
Mhm.
And that's something we seem to be losing. But I'm not going to get political.
Well, and it's sort of what's expressed in there is a humanism in the best sense of that word when we use it. A humanism that was sort of unique to America, because they were, before that, writers were agrarian in a very, very implicit sense. But when modernization comes, you become very cognizant of what you're losing, and you really see that in there.
Sure. Tanya?
I have this crazy collection of, I like to read one book at a time. That is my thing, is read a book, read it in the morning, read it in the afternoon, read it in the evening, finish it, start the next one. And at this moment,
you just like live
it
and
is. But I am currently reading The Great Gatsby on Audible because we're having an upper school lit meeting on The Great Gatsby. And I'm reading Till We Have Faces for another school thing by C.S. Lewis. And I'm reading Bring Up the Bodies, which is my early morning, what I want to read. And I feel like and then I started on Audible before I had to pause for The Great Gatsby, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James Baldwin.
Okay, you just contradicted
right,
everything
James?
you said about your reading.
I'm reading 4 different books and I want to read one.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're saying that's the way you normally read, but
Yes, but I'm having to do this. So
does this cause anxiety?
yes, it does. Yes, it does. But I'm not confusing. They are all so different from each other.
And The Great Gatsby's pretty short. Like you'll probably finish that.
It is, and this is my 4th time through. And I thought,
okay.
well, maybe if I read it on Audible, I'll like it better than I liked it in print the 3 other times I've read it. But so far, I'm still not a fan.
Well, it's one of those books where it's almost as if, and a lot of modernist books are this way, it's almost as if they're meant to be studied. They're not meant just to enjoy.
Well, maybe so, because I still am not enjoying it. But I'm going to study it with all of our upper school lit teachers, and I may come out of there loving it. We'll see.
Tell us.
I'll let you know.
Let us know. Well, it is time to answer a listener question. Her YouTube handle is at seasonalliving2881, and she commented underneath on our Farmer Boy Lessons from the Farm video from a couple weeks ago. We did an episode on agrarianism, and she asks 2 different questions. So I'm going to read her question. She says, 2 questions. Are there lists of good books and great books? And her second question is, she says, I'm not able to homeschool my children anymore. Is there a way to still embrace the classical education with them and myself? We do a lot of read alouds, but I have such a passion for it and nowhere to put it. And for the second question, I know we did answer that recently.
For another.
Yes, a few episodes ago, we answered that for a listener in Australia. So I want to point you, Seasonal Living, to that because we didn't want to ignore your question, but we did cover it just a couple weeks ago. But I know the first question she asks is probably a great one for you, Martin. Lists of good books.
I forgot what it is.
And great books.
Is there a difference?
Well, first of all, I want to commend her for making that distinction because it's a distinction that has been made in sort of the broader classical, if you want to call it that, discussion about education and what to read. And the famous statement of this is the death. John Senior's book, The Death of Christian Culture. John Senior was the head of the English program at the University of, was it Iowa or Kansas? University of Kansas back in the 50s, which was very, very influential. It was a lot of people who came out of that program who are what we would call an early version of the modern classical education movement that we see now. And in the back of that book, there was an appendix that was titled The 1,000 Good Books, right? He would say things like, well, there's the 100 great books and there are the 1,000 good books. Just to sort of give you an implicit proportion that there's a bunch of things out there that you wouldn't include on the list of great books, but that you need to read, he would say, in preparation for the 100 great books. And so he talks about, he says, the seeds are good, but the cultural soil has been depleted. In other words, we're not as ready anymore to read the great books because we haven't read all these things which the reading of those really kind of presumed. And so I just think his point is you can't just come to the great books without being prepared. And the best preparation for them is the good books.
So would you say, to answer her question, when you're talking about lists of books, go to John Senior for the 1,000 good books.
Which you can find
You can find it anywhere.
Online.
Yeah, you Google that, you
right,
find
right,
that.
right,
This
yeah.
is his original, but there are all kinds of lists that schools have adapted
Okay.
from this.
Mm-hmm.
If you Google John Senior's 1,000 Good Books, you'll get all kinds of options.
But then for the 100 great books, Adler's great books list, is that?
Yeah, I would say
what you would-
say Adler's is, there's a bunch of good ones out there. His is representative of the great books. So I would say that's a good one. To start with.
What
The Great Books of the Western World series is what we're talking about.
is that? The one that Memoria College uses?
That's the one.
Yes.
memoriacollege.org.
Yes.
Basis it's
Okay.
But you don't have to buy the great book set because that's just a compilation of the actual text.
You can get
but you could just get the list.
Get the list. That's helpful. And she can find that article. It's just
easy
on Google.
It's very
Yeah.
easy to find. Yes.
Okay.
and in the book is very good.
And we've got,
Yeah.
Martin has a book list that is on our website somewhere, or it used to be. And we've got on our Highlands Latin School, hls.org, has under student, under the student tab at the bottom, there's a list of summer reading that has all kinds of good books listed. Not great books.
Right. Because
Not
this
the
is
great books.
this
but
is an older listing, and so it doesn't, like, I'd say maybe the favorite author among my children is Bill Peet, the Wingding Dilly and Bad Bruce and all those. And those were, he was a Disney illustrator actually at first, and those were written, I think, in the late 60s, and that's after this. So there's some pretty good stuff that's still not in here.
But they're on your list,
Yeah.
wherever it is.
Yeah.
I feel like we reference it
It's on the
regularly.
website.
And we
is.
don't know where it is.
Yeah. Well, your list for boys and girls, you can just put in the search bar on the website. I do that all the time. People ask for it all the time.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
At
Yeah.
least they're now asking the website instead of me personally.
If you don't know, that was something Martin always used to do to Tanya at conferences. You would
send people to the booth to ask me for his list.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, just email the
Go to
office and
Tanya.
ask Tanya.
It's funny. Oh, well, we hope that this has been helpful to our listener. This is a lot of good information. She's going to have a lot of lists to sort through,
Yeah.
a lot of book stacks to read. And on to the topic of the day. We are going further in a series we wanted to do. We started a couple weeks ago with describing the objectives and the parts of our different groups, the different stages of our curriculum. So we started with the primary years, kindergarten to second grade. Someone asked us to just tell them the parts of the grades, the classes, and what the goal is for every year. So this episode, we're going to do third grade through sixth grade, which is a lot to tackle.
And which we call the grammar school.
We do, the grammar school years. Do you think it's easier to go subject by subject? We don't have a lot of overlap.
I think so.
I think if we go subject by subject, but all the grades in that subject, because they all are leading somewhere.
They do. Yeah, there's a trajectory that.
There is a trajectory.
Okay. Well, we can start with Latin.
Okay.
I'll take Latin.
Okay.
Tanya's worried that she's going to talk too much in this episode.
So I wanted them to choose which subjects they wanted to do, and I would just sit here quietly.
I like that idea a lot.
Yes. Well, nobody chose. So here we are, unscripted as usual.
All right. Well, I'll start with Latin. So in third grade, we start with Latina Christiana. So they've done a little bit of introductory parts of speech work in Prima Latina in second grade. So Latina Christiana in third grade and fourth grade really is introductory. It's not required before you do first form, but it's really prepping the student so that they've got some vocab ready, they've got some paradigms ready, so that way when they enter first form in fifth grade, they don't have the burden of all of the memory work alongside trying to understand how they're going to start using this material.
Or the intimidation.
That's right. That's right. Because they've been doing it since second grade. So it's just more Latin, right? And so then in fifth grade, it's going to be first form. And at that point, that this is a serious Latin study. This is cumulative. You're not going back to this stuff other than for review. You're not going to be retaught this material. And then in sixth grade, second form. So those programs, in following this trajectory, by the end of eighth grade, you will have mastered the entirety of Latin grammar.
So by the time you get out of grammar school, you've done half the Latin grammar.
Yeah,
Yes.
and what you've done is in Prima Latina, which is we usually do in second grade. That covers about half the material of Latina Christiana in the third grade, but you've already gone through sort of half of it, so you're well prepared for it. And then when you get to the form series, you've done Latina Christiana, so you've really done almost maybe about a half of first form, I think. Not I mean, it's much more complex grammar and that sort of thing. But at every level is preparing you for the next level, and then when you get to first form, you're off on Latin grammar proper.
But second form is not. I mean, I think this needs to be stressed. Second form is not going to go back and reteach what first form has.
That's right. Once you get into the serious, the forms are that is the serious. We've got to nail this now. It's like if you do pre-algebra, you've got to do it well to get to algebra 1. And first form is the same. You can skip through Latina, you don't have to do Latina, but you have to do first form to do second form. At that point, there's no going back.
Right, and there's no going back, which means, I mean, it's a testament to what we're trying to do in grammar school is not just kind of piddle around and give a little bit. Like this is a cumulative subject that is going to, when they're in middle school, they're halfway through Latin grammar.
That's right. And we talk to a lot of classical conversations people who use our curriculum, and I've heard over and over that they start the Latin grammar in the 7th grade with Henley 1, that if their children do first form in the 5th grade and second form in the 6th grade, when they get to Henley 1, it's a much better, easier experience for them.
Yeah, I can see
because they're not intimidated. They've got half the Latin grammar. And so it just makes an easier transition. The earlier you start, the better. But that doesn't mean if you haven't started, you shouldn't, because it's never too late. I mean, I was 40.
Well, I started with Henley
As an adult.
And had some language before that, not really a lot, but enough to make that not totally impossible. Because you can even do Henley and start there. But then I went on to teach these other programs that are in our program preliminary to that, and I'm thinking, this is so much. This is such a better way to do this than just starting cold.
Right.
Yeah.
I started Henley in 5th grade.
So did
not recommend it. Yeah, that's what I mean. Cheryl had Latina Christiana 1 and Latina Christiana 2, which no longer exists, as preparatory for then Henley. That was what was available.
But she wanted everybody to start really young.
Yeah.
My oldest also had Henley 1 in the 5th grade, which is why I'm here, because he had no clue what he was doing.
Right.
And I could not tell from the Henley book. And I could have told from the forms. I could have figured it out with the forms, but there was no way I could figure it out with Henley.
Well, the Henley program is very logical, and the way it does it, I do like it. And you see, right, but if you're not an experienced teacher, it's just
All right. Well, we should probably get moving.
I know. We got a lot to cover.
That is the most important.
It is the most important. Yeah.
First things first, then. Next, literature. Who wants to take that one?
I tried to do Latin, and we all chimed in. So I can try again, or Tanya, go for it. All right. So
I'm trying not to talk.
Each year, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, we have 3 or 4 books that we're digging in deeply. So the 3rd grade, we've got Farmer Boy, Charlotte's Web, the Moffats. Those books should be read, like the students will read a chapter at least twice before they move on to the next, right? Because they might read it with a parent or in a class and then read it again, but they've got a study guide to go with it, dig into it, try to pull out vocabulary, make sure they're getting comprehension, right? But these are designed to be used, where in 3rd grade, the student would be answering orally. The teacher would help them form that into a strong sentence. Teacher would write it down. 3rd grader would copy it out. And then by the point where we're in 6th grade, they'll talk about it, but then the student should be writing that down on their own, and that should kind of scale out, right? Where in 4th grade, they'll start with the teacher modeling it, and then slowly they'll give them, one or two per lesson that
they give them, starting with Lassie, they just put keywords on the board that are, so they still get the oral answer from the students, but then instead of putting the whole sentence on the board, they put keywords. And so then the students have to create their own sentences with those clues.
And the other thing to stress here is that when we say literature, we're not just meaning literature. I mean, we're using literature to study these other things that they need to know, when they're reading the sentences, when they're doing vocabulary, when they're having to write a short answer to a question.
They're learning to think more analytically about a text. What does this mean?
And we do have, there's a difference between the comprehension questions and the oral discussion questions, which are more elevated, and I would say more Socratic as we get in the grammar school.
And one of the things I noticed when we first came out with our literature guides is that there were a lot of literature guides out there, and there were 40 questions for this one chapter. We don't do that. Right. There's only depending what grade you're in, 4 or 5 questions that you are answering about the story. And so to me, that it makes it a little bit less, I don't know what the word is, burdensome. And the questions are focused on important elements of the story so that they can think about them. It's not just this drudgery work that you have to do, because I think some people think, you get this guide, to this book, and you're just, taking this apart like it's somebody. No, that's not the way. If you look at the questions, they're important aspects of the story that you can think about and talk about. And meanwhile, you're doing all these other things, which in other programs I've seen are done in isolation. We're doing it in the context of this great piece of, or good piece of, it's a great piece of literature. It's a good book. It's one of the good books.
That's right. Yeah. And one distinction that might be helpful to make, because I know people have a lot of different categories or words for categories when it comes to literature. They might be used to hearing English or language arts. I get phone calls about that a lot because I think there's some confusion about what it falls in which category. So when we say literature, we purely mean the study of literature.
That's right.
Good books, diving into it, learning progressively and age appropriately, how to understand what you're reading, analyze it, and then answer back.
But they are practicing the art of language.
Correct.
Right? So when you talk about language arts, and people use that term and they never think about what that means, but they're practicing the skill of using the language. That's what the whole writing thing, the scaling from teacher modeling to the student being able to do it themselves, understanding what vocabulary means. All of those are honing the art of language. But our content is strongly, we're
primary source
immersing these students in content that they're going to take with them.
Right, because that term language arts can encompass all kinds of non-literature.
And that's what I mean. We're just focusing on the books.
Yes. That's right. And in our teacher syllabi, which I'm in a lot, they've got literature listed, which they do an hour a day. And then, of course, that's only 4 days a week. But the kids are working at home that 5th day. And then their language arts is classical composition and English grammar recitation and
does spelling have its own?
No, spelling's in there too. So those 3 things are grouped together.
Okay.
And so they find their time. They have like an hour for those 3 things together.
Got it.
But literature gets a solid hour by itself.
Okay. I think that's helpful. I know it is kind of difficult when you hear a bunch of different terms and you don't know where where this fits. I think it's confusing.
And most people do lump literature in with ELA.
English.
Right.
Right.
And maybe, Martin, maybe this would be a good analogy. You tell me whether this works or not. I'm not sure. Tanya, I don't think can analyze this one. But spelling, just wait for where this is going. Spelling and classical composition and English grammar, those are more like sports drills, right? Where you're practicing dribbling the ball. You might be, shooting hoops. You might be doing whatever. But then the literature is almost like the scrimmage. It's where you're putting it all together. You've got to be able to spell those words right. You need to be able to form. You're working on those sentences you're working on forming. You're going to use that in literature.
Capitalize, punctuation.
Right. The composition skill of putting everything together in paragraph. You'll be doing that in literature. And so maybe that's a helpful analogy. I don't know if it is or not.
I like it.
I do. We do change. We can turn every sentence into a language lesson, but in any of these subjects, anything the students write could be turned into a language lesson. And our goal is by the end of third grade that our students have mastered the good sentence. So people say, in second grade, why don't you have a writing program? And our writing program in third is
Introduction to composition.
No, it's Adventures in Writing, IEW. And we don't spend a lot of time on that. We really are trying to master a good sentence. So we are working, and by the end of sixth grade, our students can take something beautiful that they've seen in a piece of literature and write a little paragraph about it. But we are taking it slowly.
And what's the rest of the progression through fourth, fifth, and sixth grade?
So fourth is fable, the fable stage, and fifth is the narrative stage, and they are very similar. So they're really spending 2 years mastering the same kind of techniques, and then Crea Maxim in the sixth. So really, I don't think we need to spend any more time on those because we just had Andrew Selby do a podcast on that. So I would say what?
I wanted to marry actually what we talked about in the listener question in the last episode about the Greek tragedies. And the recognition, the reversal, and the suffering that happens in a moral story that our students do again and again and again in fable and in narrative.
Yes,
that's the structure of the Greek tragedy. So,
that's nice.
Yeah, it's preparing them to be able to read. The composition work is actually preparing them to be able to read those more ancient texts.
But there is a really recent podcast where people can actually hear more about classical composition in depth.
Yes, because it is, if you're new to it, it's just a different world.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. That's going to be a good resource. Yes. Next.
English grammar recitation, the grammar work that we're doing. So, we're learning Latin. The English grammar recitation is practicing specific English skills and generalizable grammar skills, but it is not meant to be a standalone English program without Latin.
That's right.
So we do incorporate grammar work in English grammar recitation in that program.
Limited.
Yes, but I will say, I just sat in a class actually at a dual language school, a Spanish English school, and what the seventh graders were doing in English grammar recitation 5 was actually quite impressive. So even though we're saying it's in some ways it's a light grammar program because we expect you to be doing Latin alongside it, it really does get into some high level grammar concepts.
It does, but we're practicing those mainly in Latin.
Yeah, you're applying things that you're learning in Latin. To literature.
Yes,
but we are learning those really complicated rules, which does help with Latin. If you really understand what a gerund is, and
or an adverbial phrase, and
yeah. Okay, next subject. Science, or sometimes we call it nature studies.
Well, for us, it is nature studies.
That's right.
Yeah, in the grammar school. Yeah, birds and trees and insects and mammals and
astronomy.
Yep.
Stars.
Oh.
Yeah, and the distinctive feature of that is, I've been involved in public policy for many years, and specifically education policy, and they put out these standards for schools that literally have nothing to do with nature. It's all this technical stuff that they want. And of course, they would want to do, climate change, and they want to do all this other stuff. But the next generation science standards, which was the last big national standards they put out, there was no content in there at all. There was nothing about nature. And if you read around a little bit, you realize this is the big problem in science education in this country, is that we're not focused on the things that are actually out there in nature.
Right.
And so
the world that we're actually living in.
Right.
I was just at an agriculture conference yesterday, and one of the things we're talking about is developing youth to get into agriculture. But one of the problems that was presented was in one of our local high schools when they got FFA started, they realized that these kids, not only do they not, like, they don't even know what a cow is, what it looks like.
Right.
Yes.
What?
Right.
Because these kids have
And
never
this is
been
a
exposed to
rural
it.
county.
Well, no, I was thinking they were saying in Jefferson County.
Oh, okay.
No, and so it's interesting how far we've gotten from nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so one would think, well, why do you need to sit down and teach kids about mammals? They, like, kids will go to the zoo or they'll see these animals about, and that, no, we actually need to.
And this is
focus on
reflected
this.
in our museums now, because when you go into a museum, they're all set up for school groups, and it's all stuff where they're pushing buttons and they're doing all this technological stuff. And several years ago, I went to the Field Museum in Chicago, and they still had the old displays that I remember of an eagle sitting on a branch, and it portrayed this natural scene. But I think all that's you don't see that in museums anymore. They're taking all that stuff out to serve these school groups, because those are their main customers. And when really, I'm looking to that, and there was all these school groups from inner city Chicago, and they're walking through, and these kids are just looking at these in wonderment, because that's not something they'll ever see in their regular life. And we need this drastically, because if we want to save this or save that or conserve that, you have to have a love for it before you have any motivation to do that at all. And that's what the programs like ours, I think, foster.
That's beautiful.
Would you like me to say it again?
No, once is enough, but it was beautiful.
But it is a wonderful way to cultivate wonder.
Absolutely.
And keep them outside.
Absolutely.
And it is interesting. I mean, I have talked to our high school HLS students, and they will tell you what leaf they're looking at on campus or what bug. They remember it.
They do remember it.
They do.
And our goal is really, the Aristotelian impulse on science was to observe, name, describe, and categorize.
Just like Adam.
Mm-hmm. That's what Aristotle did in his books on
science, on natural science.
On natural.
And so that's really, we're giving the students that habit. And like you said, I wish, and Cheryl's got that great article about walking through the forest with her husband, and she was a biology major, but he could identify the trees. And it is a great treasure for those students to have.
Well, and I'll often say, our program focuses on nature and narrative. Okay, like the Tyner books, like they tell the story of medicine, and if you look at the old readers that were used in schools at the turn of the century, but up to the turn of the century, they're all the story of a bee, so it's put in a narrative context, a story context too, not just a narrative context in which you can learn more about this creature, because that's how we really learn things best.
True. Okay. Let's move on to the broader category of history. So in here, we've got kind of a lot going on. You want to start with the classical studies?
Sure.
Okay.
You're looking at
I'm
me
trying
like,
not
okay. All right. Third grade, we start with Greek mythology, and which isn't technically history, but it's setting them up to understand what's going on in Greek and Roman
That's right.
in medieval history. And so we actually, in the classical studies track, if you will, we actually spend third and fourth grade on that. And those stories just capture the children's imagination. I just remember poring over that same book as a child. And just wonderful, wonderful. I have wonderful memories of that. Not necessarily wonderful stories. There's
some crazy stuff in there.
But the Delaire's book is meant to be child appropriate. And then in fifth grade, we do Roman history through famous men of Rome. Again, like Martin was pointing out, narrative style. It's the story of a person, and you're learning Roman history through, that story, whether it's Cincinnatus or, all those people. In our recent podcast we did of Roman history, that we've tried our best to remember all of those people.
And in doing history and mythology, history is about fact. Mythology is about meaning. And so they're telling stories they're about human nature and what we do. And there's cautionary tales in those, and there's ones where people do good things. And so you put those two together, and you're getting these two very important things. And because history has meaning to it too, but but the emphasis is on a chronology of something, whereas mythology is just telling you the way that Greeks thought about things.
And
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's two other things. We do Greek mythology, and we go to Roman history, and then medieval history, and then 7th grade is Greek. So famous men of Rome, famous men of the Middle Ages, famous men of Greece. But we do it that way because we're trying to go through the civilizations. Greece should be before Rome, but the Greek history is more chaotic, and it's so Roman history is very linear, and so by starting with Rome, it's something easier for the students to grasp. And they've spent 2 years in Greek mythology, so they're ready to move on.
And the Romans themselves were more practical people, and practical things are easier to understand than, the important things going on in Greece were philosophy and drama and all those things. And
Lots of war.
Well, all of them, lots of war. But the Romans, you have these very clear stages of Roman history so that you can kind of understand how to think historically.
And we do have study guides, just like we do for literature. We're doing the same thing in classical studies in order to make sure we're pulling all that out. And
we, when we do, even though we're not doing history chronologically, we are doing it chronologically within the time period. So we start Roman history with Romulus and Remus, and we go through the fall of the empire. But Cheryl really wanted it to be age appropriate, and she felt like Roman history was more age appropriate for young students than Greek history. But it works out fine because when we do go back to Greek history after the Middle Ages, then it's the year before they read Homer. So we're really setting them up.
Well, some people are really into that you should teach history in the order in which it happened. And if you think about that, that's not going to work out real well. I mean, pedagogically, that's not really a wise way to do it, because you want to do the things that are in teaching. You want to do things that are more understandable to the things that are harder to understand. And starting at the very beginning and working your way through in this strictly chronological is not really the best way to do that.
Do we want to talk about Bible in this context of history?
We sure can.
So in the primary years, we've really tried to go through the Bible once. And so we hit 3rd grade, we start again in Genesis with the Golden Children's Bible. So K-2, we've been using some form of a retelling, right?
It's actual scripture, but it's like 2 paragraphs.
Oh yeah, it's been very cut down. Whereas Golden Children's Bible is New King James.
Yes.
And much longer sections. And so in 3rd and 4th grade, 3rd and 4th grade, they go basically through the Torah, the first 5 books. And then in 5th grade, they'll do the rest of the Old Testament. And then in 6th grade, they will do the New Testament. So that's our trajectory. Again, with a study guide, pulling out that important stuff.
And memorizing a memory verse every single week.
And the Golden Children's Bible, I think, was my idea. I brought that to Cheryl and I promoted that with her because it is a simplified King James.
Yes.
As I think you said. And so the language, you still have that exalted language. And the illustrations were really the best illustrations. The only problem with it was that Jesus has almost like blondish hair. So the first assignment should be go in and have your kids color Jesus's hair to be a brunette. Then you're fine. But everything else, and I still, because that book was in the dentist's office when I was a kid, and I remember reading that thing, and I just that I can see it in my mind, the drawing of David and Goliath.
Well, do you know, when I first saw that Bible and she handed it to me and said I needed to teach, I was teaching 5th grade, so I was actually going to be teaching the New Testament. And I said, well, this is very old-fashioned looking, and could I find another one? And she said, sure, if you can find one, but I want that King James elevated language. And so I remember going to Borders, going to Barnes & Noble. I went to every bookstore in Louisville, and I read every children's Bible, and there was none other out there that used actual scripture. They were all these retellings.
Yes.
And so that really is the only one. Even though Jesus is
and the
blonde.
illustrations in them now are very cartoonish, and
they are very cartoonish. But to me, those just looked really old-fashioned. But after teaching it, I got really interested in it because the kids loved them.
Hmm.
They look at because
There's
they're so
enough detail.
detailed. Yes.
Well, it's also strange for somebody who promotes classical education to say that something is old-fashioned as a
Well,
criticism.
I'm just telling you, it looked. They just didn't. They didn't appeal to me at first, but I have grown.
And the goal of the Christian Studies program is biblical literacy.
In the
They
grammar,
They are in
yes.
scriptures. They
That's
understand the people, the places, the events. They're
Yes.
moving through the stories.
We're trying to put that map in
characters.
their heads.
That's right.
And then when
That's
they do early church history, when they do Augustine, when they do Craft and C.S. Lewis, and
Mhm.
we've done that hard work in the primary and grammar schools,
Yeah.
that basic work that they're ready for.
Well,
that's
and
on
also
grade
the
level.
maps. I mean, I do not understand how you can know anything unless the geographical references in there
Mm.
make sense to you. How do
Sure.
you even do that? And I
Sure.
remember teaching a Sunday school class in my church with like middle schoolers, and they could not tell me where Palestine was on a map.
Listen, we've got the best student atlas
Oh, I
that
bet
we
we do.
used for years, and I'm getting ready to start selling that thing as soon as it comes in because it needs to be a part of our Christian Studies program. I think it's on order. But
Okay.
he segued very well
Oh, yes.
into modern studies
Yes,
and
American and
geography.
modern. Yeah.
Yes,
I wanted to make the additional
importance.
point that in that story, I haven't finished my story yet. In that class, okay, the pastor's daughter was in the class, and she could not tell me where Palestine was on the map. And I told her father, the pastor, I said, do you know your daughter does not know where Palestine is? He said, oh, yes, she does. I said, nope. You know. And later proved it. So
A case for geography.
case for geography. Yeah.
That's right. Which we cover in the grammar school years with, let's see, we do geography 1.
It starts with states and
States and
capitals.
capitals.
Okay.
Of which my favorite state in there is the state of Georgia. I did it, Hunter. I got it in there.
Mine is
Okay.
Kentucky. I just like to throw that out there as long as we're throwing out favorite states. But we do states and capitals 3rd and 4th grade. And then geography 1, which
Right.
focuses on Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa.
Mhm.
And
Which sounds odd.
well,
I mean, it's
Why did we choose those places?
it's the center of the West if we're teaching Western civilization.
and it's what they're studying.
known.
The
Yeah.
areas
Yeah.
they're studying in classical and Christian studies. And, as Martin has said, it's very important that they know where Palestine is. So we teach them that.
Well, and just geographical coordinates. People do not know geographical coordinates, and I can prove it right now.
Mhm.
Okay.
Tell me where north is.
Oh, it's up here.
Oh, no. But it proved my point. It's that way.
Is it really?
I
Yes.
can't. That has nothing to do with knowing a map.
Oh,
You either have.
excuse me. No, and this is much worse
No.
because everyone has their phones out.
that's
and
not-
it's always
no.
up.
I'm not going
As
to.
if it's north, and you could be going south.
I
and
have
it's
no
up
sense
on
of
your
direction.
Hold on, but
screen.
Martin,
This is
I
the
wanna-
image that's
are
embedded
you
in your
are
mind.
you like constantly like every room you go in trying to figure out where north is?
Oh, I have to do, like when I'm in a hotel room or something, I have to know where north is.
What?
Why?
Why does it bother
Because
you?
I know where I am.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's kudos to you. That's great.
But no,
I don't
and
live that way.
I will tell you that I bet most people were that way up until about 20, 30 years ago.
You're probably right.
But now we
Sure.
don't care anymore.
Well, wayfinding has changed so much.
Yes. Oh, totally.
So
Mhm.
we are completely beholden to GPS. Speaking for myself,
Yeah, yeah.
I am.
And yet
Yeah.
people who think north is up.
I don't have any sense of direction. I couldn't tell you where north is from anywhere.
What if somebody dropped you off in a forest somewhere?
I would just
How would you
die
find
of
your way out?
starvation because I also don't know which berries are edible.
One of our science writers has a book on that, I've heard.
I was
Doug.
not classically educated. I need to do something about it.
Oh.
Okay, so then the rest of the world.
Mhm.
After we
Sixth
do,
grade.
yes,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
we do the rest of the world. So our kids come out of grammar school able to map the world,
Mhm.
or at
They
least the
know-
majority.
That's right. They know
of
the
it.
world,
We
and of
don't-
course, they know states and capitals in the U.S.
Yes,
Right.
Yes, and we review each one of those each year as we move on to the next region. But Cheryl thought that it was really important. At first we were doing American history every year,
Mhm.
and she felt like that, she was always big on time on task.
Yeah.
And she said, this is we're repeating the same history. year after year. But the better use of time would be to spend that time in geography and really know where the context of the places that they're studying. And so she put off American history until the 7th grade when we do a full American history survey. And then, of course, they have high school American history too. So, I mean, they get plenty of American history, but this was, she felt, the best use of a grammar school student's time.
And I'm glad you addressed that. I get questions about that. I think sometimes maybe it's because what people have experienced themselves in school or what schools are doing now in terms of teaching children American history really early. I think sometimes people are surprised if we don't, or they wonder if they're missing something.
Sure. And we, in K to 2, we are doing a lot of those K to 2 little American history thing, they know who Columbus is and they know where the oceans are and all of those, basic things. And then we added these American history novel sets that students can read to find out about their history. And we've talked a lot about going to the local places that are historical in the area that you live. So there's, because we live here and our country is so young,
right,
that we don't really need on a grammar school level to repeat that history year after year.
We are on to the last subject, math.
Okay, time to adjourn.
I know.
Really?
I'm going to let Tanya do
math.
this.
Oh, great. So
Third
we
grade
use Rod and Staff math, and it is very traditional, very basic. There's no pre-algebra in there. There's very little geometry. I mean, there is some shapes work, but it really is, the majority of our math program is mastering math facts. And so in 3rd grade, we are mastering addition or multiplication and division, but we're continuing to practice addition and subtraction, which is our Memoria Math Challenge time drills every single day. And then in 5th grade, we add on a little bit more. Well, 4th and 4th, we are really still mastering multiplication, division, long multiplication, longer division. And so that keeps getting more complicated every year. But it is, you can look at the Rod and Staff math table of contents, and it is basically the same from year to year. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, decimals, percentages, and then finally in 6, ratios. And it just gets harder. Harder problems, bigger problems, more difficult concepts. But our goal is that when our students go to pre-algebra in that more abstract math, that they will be developmentally ready for that, but also that they have the foundation that they need so that the pre-algebra teachers can concentrate on those things and not on why can't anybody do this multiplication problem?
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because people ask us, well, what's your 7th grade math? And we say, we go from 6th grade, Rod and Staff, to pre-algebra in 7th grade.
That's right.
And it is a leap, but they can do it.
Oh, yes, they can do it.
You're just doing more, you're dealing with more abstract concepts, but you're still doing the same basic
applying
functions of arithmetic.
Yeah, and if you have to use a calculator for every little operation, you don't have your math facts. Plus, it's just arithmetic's what you're using pretty much every day. I mean, somebody asked me the other day, I couldn't remember how old my mother was. And so my wife says, well, how old is your mother? So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, she was born in 1939. 39 minus 100 is 61. So it's 61 years in the 20th century, 25 years, we're in 2025 now, add 25 to 61, and you get 86. And that was just happened in my mind very quickly. And I have to do that all the time with certain things. And really, arithmetic and algebra is another thing. And I would think in farming, this could come in handy too. Maybe you don't do, well, if you're not growing that many crops, but I mean, if I'm a farmer and I've got this plot of land and it's this by this, and I have this much stuff that's supposed to do this much of the field, I'll know how many bottles of that, whatever fertilizer I need, stuff like that.
I mean,
which is practical.
I'll have to do that in my head. If I'm on the phone with somebody ordering seed, like for pasture or whatever, and I know I need, 12 pounds per acre. And then I have to quickly say, well, I got 17 acres. And so I need 100 and, what did I say, 17 acres? Yeah. So I need 170 plus 34. So 204 pounds of seed. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, people should be able to
frequently
do those kinds of operations. And I don't think we spend enough time in a lot of our schools on just arithmetic and really mastering arithmetic to even do that.
And not knowing your arithmetic and trying to go into algebra is like not knowing your Latin vocabulary and trying to go into translation. Right? I mean, it's
If you have to look
you're
up
just going to keep
every word.
looking everything up, whether it's a calculator or whether it's in a Latin
It's going to
dictionary.
make every other higher
difficult.
mathematical thing harder.
And I think that then makes our final point is that we are trying in the grammar school to spend our time doing the most valuable things to do with that time.
Mm.
And pre-algebra is not it in the 4th grade.
No.
They're not ready. They struggle with word problems. We have to really work, because they're more abstract. And so we do word problems with them together because they do struggle with those. And so it was really for Cheryl about what is the best use of their time so that when they do get to middle school, high school, they're prepared and they've got the tools that they need. We've equipped them. And that's that you talk about all the time, skills versus something, but I can't.
It's not like in the grammar school, we are saying you can't do this because it's developmentally inappropriate, so we're just never going to do it. We are actively working towards getting them there. Like
That's
we talked
right.
in literature,
That's right.
we do spend a lot of time in just basic comprehension because that's what they need to master at that time. But we do have oral discussions about the bigger topics about what's going on. But we know that they're not ready for us to assess it, to expect mastery of that or anything like that. But we're prepping them so that we can do that in middle school and high school.
Did I leave anything out?
Not that
I
I
think
can
we got
think
most
of.
of it. All of it?
Skills versus what?
Martin.
Versus content?
Okay.
Oh.
Here we go. Oh, good discussion. I have to go figure out where north is now.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
my homework. But thanks for walking us through everything. Mostly Paul, but Tanya.
Yeah, I don't know why I did most of the talking.
It's because every time we do curriculum, I feel like I talk all the time because this is where I live. This is my life right here. And so I didn't want to talk all the time. I still talk plenty though.
No. It was all helpful.
And Martin said he didn't have anything to talk about, and he
Can't shut him up.
he just kept on talking.
I'll shut up now.
But he's going out of town soon. So
That's right.
oh.
Till May.
Yeah, to me.
We'll miss you, Martin. Well, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.